For all of human history, the sun has never been questioned. It has always been there before us, and it will almost certainly outlast us. Every day, without effort or intention, it holds the earth in place, warms the surface, feeds the oceans, and quietly keeps time for everything that lives here. We don't notice its presence because it never leaves. Its gravity is constant. Its light is expected. Its influence is so complete that life itself learned to grow around it without ever needing to think about why it exists. But imagine a universe where that assumption fails, not with a warning, not with a catastrophe we can see coming, just a single moment where the sun is no longer there, no light, no gravity, no trace, as if it were quietly removed from reality itself. Before we continue, if you enjoy slow, thoughtful journeys through space and science, you're welcome to subscribe to Theories Before Sleep. These videos are made to be listened to calmly, letting ideas unfold gently without urgency or distraction. What makes this question unsettling is not the instant darkness, but the delay. The delay before Earth notices. The delay before the oceans respond. The delay before gravity reveals what has already changed. For a brief moment, everything continues exactly as before, even though the system that made it possible is already gone. Tonight, we're not rushing to the end. We're taking this step by step, following the consequences as they spread outward through space, time, and life itself. Because if the sun suddenly disappeared, the most surprising part wouldn't be how quickly the universe reacts, it would be how quietly it happens at first. When imagining the sun suddenly disappearing, the first thing to understand is that nothing on Earth would notice immediately. There would be no instant darkness, no sudden cold, no dramatic signal in the sky. For a short while, reality would continue exactly as it always has, because light and gravity do not act instantly across space. The sun is about 8 light minutes away from Earth. That means the sunlight warming the planet right now left the sun 8 minutes ago. If the sun vanished in this exact moment, its light would continue travelling toward us unchanged for a little more than 8 minutes. During that time, the sky would still be blue, shadows would still fall in the same places, and solar panels would continue generating power as if nothing were wrong. Even astronomers watching the sun through telescopes would see no difference at first. The image they observe is always a picture of the past. The same delay applies to gravity. The sun's gravitational influence does not reach Earth instantly either. Earth does not orbit the sun because of some invisible tether pulling it in real time. It follows a curved path through space, shaped by the sun's gravity as it existed minutes ago. If the sun disappeared, Earth would continue moving as if the sun was still there, following the same orbital path for those same 8 minutes. For a brief moment, the solar system would behave like a memory of itself. This delay creates one of the most unsettling aspects of the scenario. The universe would already be broken, but Earth would not know yet. Life would continue normally. Birds would still fly, oceans would still move. People would still walk outside under sunlight that no longer has a source. The cause of everything sustaining life would be gone, but its effects would linger just long enough to feel cruelly ordinary. Then, after about 8 minutes, the truth would arrive all at once. The sun would not dim gradually. It would not fade like a sunset. It would simply turn off. One moment the sky would be bright. The next, the sun would vanish completely, leaving behind a dark, empty patch where it once was. Day would instantly become night across the entire planet. Not dusk, not twilight, full darkness. The moon would also disappear from the sky at the same moment, not because it vanished, but because it no longer has sunlight to reflect. The familiar glow that lights up the night would be gone, leaving the sky far darker than any natural night humans have ever experienced. Even during a new moon, the sky still carries scattered sunlight and atmospheric glow. In this case, that background light would collapse. At the same instant the light disappears. Earth would lose its orbital anchor. Without the sun's gravity, Earth would no longer be bound to a curved orbit. Instead, it would continue moving in a straight line through space at about 30 kilometers per second, the speed it had while orbiting. Then noticing, there would be no sudden jolt or shock felt by people on the surface. Gravity on Earth itself would remain the same. because that gravity comes from Earth's mass, not the Sun's. You would not feel lighter, you would not float. You would still stand firmly on the ground. But Earth would no longer be part of a solar system. From that moment on, Earth would become a rogue planet, drifting freely through interstellar space. Its direction would be determined by the exact position and velocity it had at the moment the Sun's gravity stopped influencing it. There would be no destination, no path to follow, just endless motion through the dark. Within minutes of the Sun's disappearance, temperatures would begin to fall, but not instantly. Earth does not lose heat immediately. The oceans, land and atmosphere store enormous amounts of thermal energy. For a short while, residual warmth would remain, especially near the surface and in the oceans. Weather systems would continue to move, driven by momentum and leftover heat differences. Winds would still blow, waves would still crash. But the source of all replenishing energy would be gone. Photosynthesis would stop almost immediately. Plants do not store enough energy to survive long without sunlight. Within days, plant metabolism would slow dramatically. Leaves would wilt, growth would halt. The base of nearly every food chain on Earth would begin to collapse silently. The temperature drop would become more noticeable within the first day. Surface temperatures would begin to fall steadily, especially at night, which would now be permanent. Within a week, average global temperatures would drop below freezing in most regions. Tropical areas would cool rapidly, losing the warmth that had defined them for millions of years. The oceans would begin a slow transformation. The surface layers would cool first, forming ice that would gradually spread. Beneath the ice, liquid water would remain warm for much longer, insulated by the ice itself. This would become one of the last refuges for life. But before those longer-term consequences unfold, the immediate psychological impact would be overwhelming. The sudden disappearance of the sun would shatter every rhythm humanity has ever known. There would be no sunrise to mark morning, no sunset to signal night. Time would lose one of its most fundamental anchors. Artificial light could replace brightness, but it could not replace meaning. The sky itself would feel wrong, empty, unbalanced, unfamiliar. Stars would become visible everywhere, all the time. Without sunlight scattering through the atmosphere, the sky would reveal a dense, overwhelming field of stars. The Milky Way would stretch across the sky with a clarity never seen before, but instead of inspiring wonder, it would feel oppressive, a reminder that Earth is now alone, untethered, and exposed. Communication systems would still work, at least initially. Power grids would fail gradually as energy sources dependent on solar input collapse. Nuclear and geothermal power could extend functionality for a time, but the infrastructure supporting modern civilization would struggle to adapt to a world without sunlight. Satellites orbiting Earth would continue functioning briefly, but satellites orbiting the Sun would be lost forever, drifting away on their own paths. Space probes would never receive another signal from the center of the solar system. The concept of home would dissolve beyond Earth itself, and all of this would be happening without any explosion, without any warning, without any visible cause. The universe would not announce what happened, it would simply stop providing what it always had. In this first stage, the most disturbing truth is not how fast life begins to fail, but how normal everything feels at the beginning. The Earth would not scream, it would not crack open, it would quietly continue moving forward, carrying life with it, into a future shaped not by fire or impact, but by absence. And that absence would only grow heavier with time. As the hours pass and the reality of the sun's absence settles in, Earth begins to change in ways that are slow, relentless, and deeply unforgiving. The initial shock has already occurred. The darkness has arrived. Now comes the quiet unraveling of systems that were never designed to function without a star at their center. Within the first 24 hours, the planet's surface temperature continues to fall steadily. The drop is not uniform. Land cools faster than water, and high altitudes lose heat more rapidly than low-lying regions. Deserts, which rely heavily on direct sunlight, experience some of the fastest temperature declines. Tropical regions, once stable and warm, begin to feel an unfamiliar chill. Even areas near the equator are no longer protected. The atmosphere, still intact and dense, delays the worst effects, but it cannot stop them. Heat escapes into space continuously. Without incoming solar energy to replace it, Earth becomes a world that is slowly bleeding warmth. Weather systems behave strangely during this phase. Winds persist for a while, driven by residual temperature differences between regions, but these differences weaken with every passing day. Storms fade, clouds thin out. Rain becomes rare, not because moisture disappears immediately, but because the energy required to lift and circulate air is no longer available. The sky grows still. Within a few days, most surface freshwater begins to freeze. Lakes, rivers, and reservoirs develop thick ice covers. Flowing water slows, then stops entirely as ice blocks channels and disrupts currents. Infrastructure built around liquid water, pipelines, treatment plants, irrigation systems, begins to fail rapidly. Not because of violence, but because of cold. The oceans respond more slowly, but they are not immune. The upper layers cool first, forming a growing shell of ice that spreads outward from the poles and inward from coastlines. Beneath this frozen surface, the deep ocean remains liquid, insulated by water's unique ability to store heat. For a time, the oceans act as Earth's thermal memory, holding on to warmth long after the sun is gone. Life on land enters crisis almost immediately. Plants die first. Photosynthesis stops and stored sugars are consumed within days. Forests, fields, and grasslands become vast, silent graveyards of frozen vegetation. Herbivores follow soon after, unable to survive without food. Carnivores linger slightly longer, feeding on remaining animals, but collapse follows inevitably. Human civilization struggles to adapt, but its dependence on sunlight is deeper than it appears. Food supply chains fail quickly. Agriculture collapses. Transportation systems built around predictable climates and stable infrastructure break down. Artificial heating becomes essential, but energy sources are limited. Fossil fuels can provide warmth temporarily, but distribution systems are strained by freezing conditions and infrastructure failure. 1F. Cities become islands of artificial light and heat surrounded by darkness, but even these islands are fragile. Power grids fail under the strain of cold, backup systems run out. Nuclear facilities may continue operating for a time, but they depend on cooling systems and maintenance that become increasingly difficult in a frozen world. As days turn into weeks, the atmosphere itself begins to change. Carbon dioxide, normally a greenhouse gas that helps retain heat, starts to freeze out of the air. As temperatures fall below -78 degrees Celsius, carbon dioxide begins to condense into dry ice, snowing down onto the surface. This further reduces the atmosphere's ability to trap heat, accelerating the cooling process. Oxygen and nitrogen, the primary components of Earth's air, remain gaseous for much longer, but the thinning atmosphere becomes increasingly ineffective at insulating the planet. Pressure drops. Breathing becomes harder in some regions, especially at higher altitudes. The psychological impact on any surviving humans would be immense. The absence of daylight erases the sense of time. Days and nights blend into a continuous, unbroken darkness. Circadian rhythms collapse. Sleep becomes irregular. Mental health deteriorates under isolation, cold, and uncertainty. The sky, once familiar, becomes alien. Stars remain fixed and unmoving without the sun's glare. Constellations no longer rise and set in meaningful ways. The moon is invisible not because it is gone, but because it reflects nothing. The emotional connection to the sky, built over thousands of years, dissolves. Earth's motion through space continues silently. It does not slow. Asensory. It does not stop. It drifts through the galaxy as a cold, dark object, no longer announcing its presence with reflected sunlight. From a distance, Earth becomes almost invisible, a planet without a star. Weeks pass. Surface temperatures drop below -40 degrees Celsius across most of the planet. Human survival on the surface becomes nearly impossible. Any remaining populations retreat underground, into mines, bunkers, and deep facilities where geothermal heat and insulation offer the last protection. These environments become the final shelters of complex life. Below the surface, some ecosystems persist. Deep ocean hydrothermal vents continue to release heat from Earth's interior. Chemosynthetic bacteria, which do not rely on sunlight, remain active. Small, isolated food webs continue in total darkness, powered not by the sun but by the planet itself. This distinction becomes critical. Earth is no longer a solar-powered world. It becomes a geothermal one. However, even this internal heat is limited. Earth's core cools slowly, but it is not infinite. Over thousands of years, geothermal energy will decline. But in the short term, it becomes the last refuge. The biosphere collapses into pockets, fragmented, isolated, and silent. Life no longer spreads across the surface. It hides. And yet, Earth does not die immediately. It transitions from a living planet to a drifting archive. Every mountain, every frozen ocean, every buried city becomes a record of what once depended on a star that is no longer there. The planet carries its history with it as it moves through interstellar space, unchanged by day or night, untouched by seasons. At this stage, the most profound realization is this: Earth does not end because the sun disappears. It changes identity. It stops being a world shaped by light and becomes a world shaped by absence, and that absence will define everything that follows. As time stretches beyond the first weeks and into months, Earth continues its silent transformation, moving farther away from everything that once defined it. The immediate collapse of surface life has already happened. What remains now is a slower, deeper shift, one that unfolds beneath ice, stone, and memory. By this stage, the surface of the planet is almost entirely frozen. Continents are locked under thick ice sheets. Former oceans are sealed beneath expanding layers of ice that grow downward year after year. Only the deepest parts of the seas remain liquid, protected by pressure, residual heat, and the insulating properties of ice itself. Above them, the world is motionless and dark. The atmosphere continues to thin. With no sunlight to drive circulation, air becomes stagnant. Carbon dioxide is largely frozen out, settling onto the surface as dry ice. Water vapor is gone as well, locked into ice. What remains is a sparse mix of nitrogen and oxygen, slowly cooling, slowly settling. Winds fade almost completely. The planet becomes eerily still. At this point, Earth begins to resemble a rogue planet more than the world it once was. Without the sun, there are no seasons, no weather cycles, no climatic feedback loops. Time loses its texture. One year is indistinguishable from the next. Change still happens, but it happens so slowly that it no longer defines experience. Deep below the surface, however, the story is different. Beneath kilometers of ice, the oceans remain alive in a quiet, limited way. Hydrothermal vents continue to pump heat and minerals into the water, just as they did long before life ever reached the surface. Around these vents, microbial ecosystems persist, powered not by sunlight but by chemistry. Hydrogen sulfide, methane, and iron compounds provide energy. Life contracts into its oldest form. These ecosystems are stable but isolated. Without surface input, nutrients are limited. Evolution slows, complexity declines. Multicellular life struggles to persist without large energy flows. Over time, ecosystems simplify, shedding everything that is no longer necessary. On land, any remaining humans are confined to deep underground environments. Survival is no longer about civilization, progress, or expansion. Every species is about science. It is about endurance. Heating comes from nuclear reactors or geothermal sources. Food production relies on stored supplies, artificial lighting, and eventually synthetic or microbial sources. Every calorie is precious. Social structures change. Large populations are no longer sustainable. Communities shrink. Decision-making becomes focused on maintenance rather than growth. Culture slows, becoming introspective, memory-driven. The idea of the future narrows. Long-term plans lose meaning in a world where external conditions never improve. The psychological burden is immense. Darkness is permanent. The sky offers no reassurance. There is no sunrise to mark hope, no seasonal change to signal renewal. Even the stars, once inspiring, become a reminder of distance and isolation. Earth is no longer part of a system. It is alone. Biologically, the human body begins to adapt in subtle ways. Reduced sunlight eliminates natural vitamin D production. Artificial substitutes become essential. Long-term confinement affects circadian rhythms permanently. Sleep cycles drift. Time becomes abstract. Generations born underground grow up without ever seeing the sky. Over decades, infrastructure degrades. Materials become brittle in extreme cold. Metals contract. Electronics fail more often. Maintenance becomes increasingly difficult as resources dwindle. Knowledge survives, but application becomes harder. Tools wear out faster than they can be replaced. Meanwhile, Earth continues its journey through the galaxy. It passes through regions of varying stellar density. Occasionally, distant stars provide faint warmth, but never enough to matter. Gravity from passing stars slightly alters Earth's trajectory over millions of years, but these changes are subtle, almost imperceptible. The planet becomes a cosmic drifter, carrying its frozen oceans, buried life, and silent history across interstellar space. At this stage, one of the most striking realizations emerges. Earth is not dying in a dramatic sense. It is aging. Without the sun, Earth transitions into a long, quiet middle age, a phase defined by conservation rather than creation. Energy is rationed, motion slows, complexity declines, but existence continues. From a distant observer's perspective, Earth would be nearly invisible. Without reflected sunlight, it emits almost no light. Only faint infrared radiation leaks from its interior. It becomes a shadow among shadows, indistinguishable from countless other cold objects drifting through the galaxy. Yet inside that shadow, traces of life remain. Even as surface ecosystems vanish, even as civilizations collapse, the planet retains memory. Not memory in a conscious sense, but physical memory. Fossil records, frozen cities, layered ice sheets, chemical signatures in rock, all preserved by cold. Earth becomes an archive sealed by ice. In time, even the deep oceans begin to cool further. Ice thickens downward. Hydrothermal activity continues, but its influence weakens. Ecosystems shrink further. Life retreats deeper, closer to heat sources, clustering around fewer and fewer vents. Evolution continues, but slowly. Without sunlight-driven energy, mutation rates drop. Selection pressures narrow. Life stabilizes into forms optimized for minimal energy environments. This process is not extinction in the usual sense. It is compression. Life does not vanish entirely. It condenses. What began as a vibrant, star-fed biosphere becomes a handful of isolated chemical networks clinging to the last warmth the planet can provide. Earth transitions from a living world to a life-bearing relic, and still, it moves. There is no final moment where everything stops. No clear boundary between life and lifelessness, just a gradual thinning of possibility, a narrowing of pathways, a slow surrender of complexity to simplicity. At this stage, the sun is no longer remembered as a source of light. It becomes a concept, something spoken of in records, stories, data files. For future generations underground, the idea of a star may feel abstract, almost mythical. Yet everything they are still depends on what that star once provided. This is the quiet truth of Earth without the sun. The planet does not collapse, it endures. But endurance, stripped of renewal, is not the same as life as it once was. And as the frozen world continues its endless journey through space, it carries with it a reminder written into every layer of ice and stone, that even the most stable systems depend on forces that once gone can never be replaced. As centuries pass, Earth settles into a new equilibrium, one that no longer resembles a living planet, but is not yet a dead one either. The dramatic changes have already occurred. The surface is frozen solid, the atmosphere is thin and quiet. What remains now is a long period of slow adjustment, where the planet's internal processes become the only drivers of change. Deep beneath the ice, Earth's interior continues to release heat. Radioactive decay in the mantle and core does not stop just because the sun is gone. This internal energy, though modest compared to solar input, becomes the planet's last engine. It drives tectonic activity, sustains hydrothermal systems, and maintains pockets of liquid water far below the frozen crust. Over time, the ice covering the oceans grows thicker, kilometers thick in some regions. The pressure at the base of this ice creates conditions where water can remain liquid even at extremely low temperatures. This forms vast subsurface oceans, dark and isolated, sealed off from the surface by an impenetrable barrier of ice. Within these hidden oceans, life continues in a reduced but persistent form. Microbial communities adapt to extreme scarcity. Metabolism slows to the bare minimum required for survival. Some organisms may enter near-dormant states, dividing only once every centuries or millennia. Life becomes less about growth and more about continuity. On land, the crust cools and contracts. Volcanic activity becomes rarer but does not cease entirely. Occasional eruptions punch through the ice, releasing heat and gases before freezing solid again. These events are brief and localized, but they create temporary environments where chemical reactions accelerate, adding subtle complexity to an otherwise static world. The frozen surface acts as a time capsule. Cities, mountains, forests, and coastlines remain preserved in ice and permafrost. Erosion nearly stops. Without liquid water or wind, landscapes change only over geological timescales. Human structures, once fragile, become strangely durable in the cold. Skyscrapers stand frozen in place, roads vanish beneath ice. Entire civilizations are locked in stillness. If any human populations remain, they are now few and deeply adapted to subterranean life. Generations have passed underground. Language shifts. Culture becomes inward-facing, focused on preservation of knowledge and survival skills rather than exploration or expansion. The concept of outside becomes abstract, something learned from stories, not experience. Psychologically, these humans live in a world without horizons. Their reality is defined by walls, tunnels, and artificial light. The sun is no longer a lived memory, it is an idea, preserved in archives and lessons. To them, warmth comes from machines and the planet itself, not the sky. Meanwhile, Earth continues drifting through interstellar space. Occasionally it passes near other stars. These encounters are distant and fleeting. A nearby star may provide a slight increase in background radiation or a faint warming of the upper atmosphere, but never enough to reverse the planet's trajectory. Earth remains a wanderer. Over tens of thousands of years, the planet cools further. The core slowly loses heat. Plate tectonics weaken. Magnetic field generation slows, eventually fading as the core's convection diminishes. Without a magnetic field, cosmic radiation penetrates more easily, but with little atmosphere and almost no surface life left, its effects are limited. Earth becomes quieter still. At this stage, the distinction between living planet and inert world becomes increasingly blurred. Life persists, but only in isolated refuges. The surface is functionally sterile. The planet's most active processes are hidden deep below, invisible and inaccessible. Yet, from a cosmic perspective, Earth has not failed. It has followed a natural path. Planets are temporary systems. Stars come and go. Energy sources change. Earth's transformation is not unique. It is simply rare to imagine it happening suddenly, without the slow warning of stellar evolution. The absence of the sun compresses billions of years of gradual change into a single, abrupt transition, and in doing so it reveals something fundamental. Planetary habitability is not a permanent state. It is a phase, dependent on delicate balances that can be disrupted without violence. Earth now exists in a long twilight of planetary history, a phase where motion continues but purpose fades. A world defined not by what happens, but by what no longer can. As millions of years pass, Earth's identity continues to shift, not through dramatic events but through steady decline. The internal heat that once sustained deep oceans and hidden ecosystems slowly diminishes. Radioactive decay weakens, hydrothermal vents become less active. the last reliable sources of energy fade into rarity, subsurface oceans begin to freeze from the top down and the bottom up simultaneously. Ice encroaches as temperatures drop further. Liquid water retreats into ever smaller pockets, trapped where pressure and residual heat still allow it. Life, already compressed, is forced into even tighter confines. Evolution becomes extremely conservative. With limited energy and little environmental variation, there is little incentive for change. Natural selection favors stability over innovation. Organisms that persist are those that can endure extreme scarcity and long periods of dormancy. Eventually, even these refuges become unstable. As geothermal activity declines, some ecosystems collapse entirely. Others flicker on for a while longer, sustained by chemical gradients that grow weaker with time. Extinction does not arrive as a single moment. It arrives unevenly, silently, one habitat at a time. From the outside, Earth is now indistinguishable from countless other rogue planets drifting through the galaxy. It emits almost no light. Its surface temperature hovers near the background temperature of space. It carries no obvious signs of activity. And yet, the planet is still not static. Over hundreds of millions of years, gravitational interactions with passing stars and molecular clouds subtly alter Earth's trajectory. Its path bends, its speed changes. Eventually, it may be captured by another star entering a new system as a cold, inert body, or it may wander forever, alone. If Earth were to be captured, the consequences would be unpredictable. A new star could warm the surface again, melting ice and reactivating chemistry. Ancient oceans could re-emerge. Frozen gases could sublimate back into an atmosphere. In theory, life could reawaken from dormancy if anything remains capable of responding, but such a second beginning would not restore what was lost. It would not recreate forests, animals, or civilizations. It would begin something entirely new, shaped by a planet that has already aged and changed. If Earth is never captured, it will continue cooling indefinitely. Eventually, its core will solidify completely. Geological activity will cease. The planet will become fully inert, a cold, rocky sphere carrying the fossilized remains of a once living world. This end is not dramatic. There is no explosion, no collapse, no final event, just a gradual approach to equilibrium where nothing changes because nothing can. In this final state, Earth becomes a monument to contingency, a reminder that habitability is not guaranteed, and that life's persistence depends on conditions that can vanish without warning. The sun's disappearance strips away the illusion of permanence that often surrounds planetary systems. From a philosophical perspective, this scenario highlights how deeply life depends on external energy. Complexity requires flow. Order requires imbalance. Without a star, even a planet as rich as Earth inevitably simplifies, and yet there is no tragedy written into the physics itself. The universe does not mourn the loss of life. It does not record significance. Earth's transformation is neither good nor bad. It is simply consistent with the rules governing matter and energy. If intelligent observers elsewhere were to encounter Earth in this distant future, they might never know what it once was. They might see ice, rock, and silence. Or they might detect faint chemical anomalies, subtle signatures hinting at long-vanished oceans and atmospheres. But without context, even those clues would be ambiguous. The story of Earth without the sun ultimately reveals something profound about existence itself. Systems do not end because they are flawed. They end because the conditions that sustained them no longer exist. Life does not fail. It adapts until adaptation is no longer possible, and when that point is reached, the universe continues without pause. Earth's journey does not conclude with meaning or resolution. It simply persists, drifting through space, carrying the quiet evidence that once, under the light of a single star, a planet learned how to live, not forever, but long enough to matter. As the timeline stretches even further, beyond millions and into hundreds of millions of years, Earth's transformation becomes almost imperceptible to anything that might still observe it. The dramatic stages are long past. What remains is a planet settling into the deepest form of quiet, a quiet defined not by stillness, but by the absence of meaningful change. By now, the surface is a frozen shell of rock and ice, locked at temperatures only slightly above absolute zero. Any remaining atmosphere is thin, uneven, and largely inert. Nitrogen and traces of oxygen cling weakly to the planet, but without heat or circulation, they no longer behave as a dynamic system. The sky, if it can still be called that, is black and star-filled, unchanged for millions of years at a time. Deep below this surface, Earth's interior continues its slow cooling. The core, once molten and active, begins to solidify. As it does, convection weakens. The processes that once powered plate tectonics and sustained Earth's magnetic field diminish. Eventually, the magnetic field fades entirely. This loss does not trigger immediate consequences. With no surface life left to protect, radiation becomes a minor concern, but the magnetic field's disappearance marks an important symbolic shift. Earth is no longer a shielded world. It becomes fully exposed to the galaxy, just another object drifting through space, shaped only by its mass and motion. Geologically, the planet enters a static era. Without tectonic movement, continents no longer drift, mountains no longer rise, faults no longer slip. Earth's surface becomes a permanent record of its final active phase, frozen in both temperature and form. Ice sheets grow thicker, compressing everything beneath them. The weight reshapes crustal layers slowly, subtly, over immense spans of time. Under pressure, some ice transforms into exotic crystalline structures, denser and harder than anything seen on Earth today. These changes are silent, slow, and invisible from above. If any subsurface liquid water remains at this stage, it exists only in extreme isolation. Tiny pockets trapped by pressure and residual heat, sealed off from one another. These environments are rare and fragile. Life, if it still exists there at all, operates at the edge of chemical possibility. Metabolism slows to a crawl. Reproduction becomes rare. Mutation rates drop so low that evolution nearly stops. Life is no longer adapting to its environment, it is merely enduring it. Eventually, even these last refuges fail. As internal heat continues to dissipate, pressure and temperature conditions shift. Liquid water freezes entirely, chemical gradients flatten, energy sources vanish. The last ecosystems collapse, not violently, but quietly, without witnesses. At this point, Earth crosses a subtle threshold. It becomes a fully inert world. But inert does not mean erased. The planet still carries its history in its structure. Ice layers preserve atmospheric composition from different eras. Rocks record tectonic activity. Fossils remain locked beneath kilometers of ice and sediment. Entire cities lie buried, perfectly preserved in cold and darkness. Earth becomes a cosmic archive. Over billions of years, the planet continues drifting through the Milky Way. It passes through spiral arms, star-forming regions, and vast empty spaces between stars. Occasionally, nearby supernovae bathe it in radiation. Sometimes, molecular clouds obscure it completely. None of this changes the planet in any significant way. Its motion is governed only by gravity. Passing stars nudge its trajectory slightly. Galactic tides stretch and pull gently. But Earth's path remains unremarkable, one of countless objects moving through the galaxy without purpose or destination. Time, at this scale, loses all human meaning. 1,000,000 years passes like a moment. 1,000,000,000 years passes like silence. There are no clocks left to measure it, no observers to mark its passage. The planet does not know it is old. It does not know it was once alive. If in some distant future an advanced civilization were to detect Earth drifting through space, they might classify it as a rogue planet, cold, airless, and inactive. Only careful analysis would reveal anomalies, unusual isotope ratios, layered ice deposits, traces of complex chemistry frozen in place. Those clues might hint at a past rich with oceans and life. or they might be dismissed as statistical noise. Context is everything. Without context, Earth's story becomes unreadable. This is perhaps the most striking lesson of a sunless Earth. Existence leaves traces, but meaning does not persist without interpretation. The planet carries evidence of its history, but history itself fades when no one remains to remember it. From a cosmic perspective, Earth's fate is not unique. Many planets form, evolve, and fade. Most never host life at all. Some host life briefly, a few host complexity. Fewer still host consciousness. All eventually change beyond recognition. The sun's sudden disappearance simply accelerates a process that would have happened eventually through stellar evolution. It compresses billions of years of gradual dimming into a single abrupt absence. In doing so, it reveals how fragile complexity truly is, not because it is poorly designed, but because it depends on sustained imbalance. Life requires energy gradients. Civilization requires predictability. Consciousness requires continuity. Remove the star and those gradients collapse. Yet there is no sense of failure written into the outcome. The universe does not track success or loss. It only follows rules. Earth follows them perfectly. And in that perfection it becomes something new, not a cradle of life, not a living world, but a quiet traveller carrying the fossilized memory of warmth through a galaxy that does not pause to notice. This is not an ending in the dramatic sense. It is a settling, a planet reaching equilibrium with the space around it, a world no longer shaped by light but by time. And as Earth continues its endless journey through the dark, it becomes a reminder of something both humbling and profound. Even the most vibrant worlds are temporary expressions of energy and matter, and when the energy is gone, what remains is silence, preserved forever in ice and stone, though as the timeline stretches even further, beyond millions and into hundreds of millions of years, Earth's transformation becomes almost imperceptible to anything that might still observe it. The dramatic stages are long past. What remains is a planet settling into the deepest form of quiet, a quiet defined not by stillness but by the absence of meaningful change. By now, the surface is a frozen shell of rock and ice, locked at temperatures only slightly above absolute zero. Any remaining atmosphere is thin, uneven, and largely inert. Nitrogen and traces of oxygen cling weakly to the planet, but without heat or circulation, they no longer behave as a dynamic system. The sky, if it can still be called that, is black and star-filled, unchanged for millions of years at a time. Deep below this surface, Earth's interior continues its slow cooling. The core, once molten and active, begins to solidify. As it does, convection weakens. The processes that once powered plate tectonics and sustained Earth's magnetic field diminish. Eventually, the magnetic field fades entirely. This loss does not trigger immediate consequences. With no surface life left to protect, radiation becomes a minor concern, but the magnetic field's disappearance marks an important symbolic shift. Earth is no longer a shielded world. It becomes fully exposed to the galaxy, just another object drifting through space, shaped only by its mass and motion. Geologically, the planet enters a static era. Without tectonic movement, continents no longer drift. Mountains no longer rise. Faults no longer slip. Earth's surface becomes a permanent record of its final active phase, frozen in both temperature and form. Ice sheets grow thicker, compressing everything beneath them. The weight reshapes crustal layers slowly, subtly, over immense spans of time. Under pressure, some ice transforms into exotic crystalline structures, denser and harder than anything seen on Earth today. These changes are silent, slow, and invisible from above, too far beyond. If any subsurface liquid water remains at this stage, it exists only in extreme isolation, tiny pockets trapped by pressure and residual heat, sealed off from one another. These environments are rare and fragile. Life, if it still exists there at all, operates at the edge of chemical possibility. Metabolism slows to a crawl. Reproduction becomes rare. Mutation rates drop so low that evolution nearly stops. Life is no longer adapting to its environment. It is merely enduring it. Eventually, even these last refuges fail. As internal heat continues to dissipate, pressure and temperature conditions shift. Liquid water freezes entirely, chemical gradients flatten, energy sources vanish. The last ecosystems collapse, not violently, but quietly, without witnesses. At this point, Earth crosses a subtle threshold. It is no longer a life-bearing planet in any meaningful sense. It becomes a fully inert world, but inert does not mean erased. The planet still carries its history in its structure. Ice layers preserve atmospheric composition from different eras. Rocks record tectonic activity. Fossils remain locked beneath kilometers of ice and sediment. Entire cities lie buried, perfectly preserved in cold and darkness. Earth becomes a cosmic archive. Over billions of years, the planet continues drifting through the Milky Way. It passes through spiral arms, star-forming regions, and vast empty spaces between stars. Occasionally, nearby supernovae bathe it in radiation. Sometimes molecular clouds obscure it completely. None of this changes the planet in any significant way. Its motion is governed only by gravity. Passing stars nudge its trajectory slightly. Galactic tides stretch and pull gently. But Earth's path remains unremarkable, one of countless objects moving through the galaxy without purpose or destination. Time, at this scale, loses all human meaning. A million years passes like a moment. A billion years passes like silence. There are no clocks left to measure it, no observers to mark its passage. The planet does not know it is old. It does not know it was once alive. If in some distant future an advanced civilization were to detect Earth drifting through space, they might classify it as a rogue planet, cold, airless, and inactive. Only careful analysis would reveal anomalies, unusual isotope ratios, layered ice deposits, traces of complex chemistry frozen in place. Those clues might hint at a past rich with oceans and life, or they might be dismissed as statistical noise. Context is everything. Without context, Earth's story becomes unreadable. This is perhaps the most striking lesson of a sunless Earth. Existence leaves traces, but meaning does not persist without interpretation. The planet carries evidence of its history, but history itself fades when no one remains to remember it. From a cosmic perspective, Earth's fate is not unique. Many planets form, evolve, and fade. Most never host life at all. Some host life briefly, a few host complexity. Fewer still host consciousness. All eventually change beyond recognition. The sun's sudden disappearance simply accelerates a process that would have happened eventually through stellar evolution. It compresses billions of years of gradual dimming into a single abrupt absence. In doing so, it reveals how fragile complexity truly is, not because it is poorly designed, but because it depends on sustained imbalance. Life requires energy gradients. Civilization requires predictability. Consciousness requires continuity. Remove the star and those gradients collapse. Yet, there is no sense of failure written into the outcome. The universe does not track success or loss. It only follows rules. Earth follows them perfectly. And in that perfection it becomes something new. Not a cradle of life, not a living world, but a quiet traveller carrying the fossilized memory of warmth through a galaxy that does not pause to notice. This is not an ending in the dramatic sense. It is a settling, a planet reaching equilibrium with the space around it, a world no longer shaped by light but by time. And as Earth continues its endless journey through the dark, it becomes a reminder of something both humbling and profound. Even the most vibrant worlds are temporary expressions of energy and matter, and when the energy is gone, what remains is silence, preserved forever in ice and stone. As the ages stretch onward, Earth enters a phase where even its silence begins to feel complete. What once changed slowly now changes almost not at all. The planet has reached a state where time continues to pass, but the passage of time no longer produces noticeable difference. In this phase, Earth becomes less a world and more a condition, a stable arrangement of matter moving through space without expectation or destination. By now, the ice encasing the planet has become unimaginably thick. What were once oceans, seas, and coastlines are buried beneath layers of frozen water compressed into dense crystalline forms. The distinction between surface and interior blurs as pressure reshapes materials into unfamiliar states. Ice behaves less like ice and more like rock. Rock behaves more like memory. The planet's interior has cooled enough that even residual geothermal activity has largely ceased. The mantle is no longer convecting in any meaningful way. Heat flow is minimal, leaking outward at a pace so slow it barely registers against the background temperature of space. Earth no longer radiates as a warm object. It blends thermally into its surroundings. With this cooling comes a final end to internal motion. There are no hidden currents, no shifting layers, no chemical engines running in the dark. Everything that can settle has settled. Everything that can freeze has frozen. The planet has reached physical calm. In this state, Earth's structure becomes extraordinarily durable. Without internal stress or external erosion, layers remain locked in place for spans of time that exceed human comprehension. A crack in the ice remains exactly as it is for millions of years. A collapsed building remains collapsed, unchanged, entombed beneath pressure and cold. The planet becomes an archive that no longer updates itself. If any remnants of life still exist at this point, they are no longer alive in any active sense. At best, they are preserved. Molecules remain arranged in patterns that once constituted living systems, but without energy, those patterns cannot function. Biology has reduced to chemistry without motion. This raises a subtle but profound distinction. Earth is not sterile because everything has been destroyed. It is sterile because nothing is happening. Sterility here is not absence, but inactivity. The planet's journey through the galaxy continues. It passes through regions of higher stellar density, then drifts into vast interarm spaces where stars are scarce. Occasionally, distant supernovae flash across the cosmos, bathing Earth in radiation for a brief moment before fading again. These events leave faint imprints in atomic structures, but do not change the planet's overall state. Over immense periods, interstellar dust continues to accumulate. Particle by particle, Earth gathers matter from space. These grains settle gently onto the frozen surface, forming layers so thin they are almost theoretical. Given enough time, billions of years, these layers add up. Earth's surface becomes a record not only of its own history, but of the regions of the galaxy it has traversed. In this way, Earth becomes a kind of cosmic traveller's log, written not in words but in isotopes and elemental ratios. Each layer tells where the planet has been, even though no one remains to read it. The absence of observers introduces a strange paradox. Earth is, in many ways, more complete than it has ever been. It is stable, it is balanced. It is no longer struggling against entropy through complex processes. It has accepted entropy fully. Yet, from the perspective of meaning, Earth has never been emptier. Meaning requires contrast. It requires change. It requires systems that can respond to difference. In this frozen state, difference has flattened out. There are no gradients to exploit, no pathways for transformation. Everything that happens too slowly, too weakly to matter. This is what it means for a planet to truly rest. There is no suffering in this state. No awareness exists to experience loss. The planet does not miss the sun. Missing requires memory. Memory requires activity. Earth has neither. From a distance, Earth is indistinguishable from countless other rogue planets that never hosted life at all. Its extraordinary past has no visible signature unless one knows exactly where and how to look. Even then, the clues are subtle, easily overlooked. This realization carries a sobering implication. The universe does not preserve importance. It preserves structure. What mattered to life does not matter to space. The cosmos does not archive stories, it archives matter, and yet Earth's past still exists in a quiet, indirect way, not as narrative, but as configuration. Atoms remain arranged in ways that would not have occurred without life. Carbon distributions, mineral formations, isotopic ratios, all carry the faint fingerprints of biology and technology. These fingerprints are not erased, they are simply unread. Time continues. Over tens of billions of years, the galaxy itself evolves. Stars age, new stars form less frequently. The Milky Way slowly changes shape. Earth drifts through all of this unchanged, like a message in a bottle that will never be opened. Eventually, even the concept of a galaxy begins to lose relevance. As the universe expands, distant structures move beyond causal contact. Space itself stretches until isolation becomes the dominant condition everywhere. Earth, now long frozen and silent, is perfectly suited to this universe. It no longer depends on interaction, it no longer expects energy. It exists comfortably in a cosmos that has grown cold and sparse. In this sense, Earth without the Sun is not an anomaly. It is a preview, a glimpse of the long-term future of matter when stars are no longer common and energy flows are rare. The sudden disappearance of the Sun simply accelerated Earth toward a destiny that, given enough time, would have arrived anyway. This does not make the Sun unimportant, it makes it temporary. Stars are engines of difference. They create contrast, motion and complexity, but engines eventually stop. When they do, the systems built around them settle into stillness. Earth has settled, not into destruction, not into chaos, but into neutrality, a state where existence continues without emphasis, without direction, and without demand. And as the frozen planet continues its endless journey through a universe that is slowly forgetting how to shine, it stands as a quiet reminder of something fundamental. Complexity is fleeting, but existence is patient. What remains is not a world in mourning, but matter at rest. A planet that once revolved around a star, now revolving only around time itself. As the universe itself continues to age, Earth moves into a phase where even the concept of history begins to lose coherence. What once felt like a sequence of events has stretched into an almost featureless expanse of time. The planet still exists, still moves, still occupies space, but existence has become its only remaining attribute. By now, Earth's temperature has nearly equilibrated with the cosmic background. The faint warmth it once carried from radioactive decay and residual formation energy has dissipated. The planet is no longer warmer than its surroundings in any meaningful way. It no longer announces itself thermally. It blends into the cold fabric of space. The ice shell encasing Earth has reached its final form. Compression has transformed large portions of it into dense, high-pressure phases that no longer behave like ordinary ice. These structures are rigid, permanent, and stable on timescales that dwarf planetary lifespans. Beneath them, there is no longer liquid water. Every former ocean has been fully immobilized. At this point, Earth is chemically quiet. Reactions still occur, but at rates so slow they may as well be frozen in time. Diffusion happens across atomic distances over millions of years. Radioactive decay continues, but with diminishing influence. Nothing propagates, nothing cascades, nothing feeds into anything else. The planet has entered a state where cause and effect are no longer meaningful in the way they once were. In earlier eras, small changes could amplify into large consequences. A shift in temperature could alter ecosystems. A geological event could reshape continents. A single mutation could ripple through generations. Now amplification is impossible. Now amplification rounds up to move to me. Every effect is local, isolated and self-contained. Nothing grows. This is what it means for a system to lose leverage. Without leverage, the universe does not stop functioning. It simply stops expressing variation. Laws still apply, physics still holds, but outcomes no longer diverge in ways that matter. Earth becomes an example of this condition. The planet continues drifting through the Milky Way, but even the galaxy itself is changing. Star formation has slowed significantly. Massive stars are rare. Supernovae are infrequent. The night sky, once rich with activity, grows quieter with each passing billion years. From Earth's frozen surface, this change would not be visible. There are no observers left to notice. But from a cosmic perspective, Earth is moving through a universe that is slowly losing its ability to generate new complexity. Occasionally, Earth passes through the faint gravitational influence of a distant object, a star, a black hole, a cluster. These encounters alter its trajectory slightly, bending its path by tiny angles over immense periods. But they do not restore interaction, they do not provide energy, they only redirect motion. Motion at this stage is Earth's last dynamic property. Even that motion will eventually lose significance. As the universe expands, distant regions move beyond causal contact, interactions become rarer, space grows emptier. Earth's path becomes less about where it is going and more about where it is no longer connected to. In this environment, Earth is perfectly adapted, not because it thrives, but because it requires nothing. There is no longer a distinction between active and inactive. Everything is inactive. Everything is static relative to its surroundings. Change happens only because time has not ended, not because anything drives it. This reveals a deeper truth about planetary existence. Planets are not defined by what they are made of, but by what they participate in. When participation ends, when energy, interaction, and feedback disappear, a planet becomes indistinguishable from any other lump of matter of similar mass. Earth has crossed that boundary, yet the planet still carries an internal asymmetry that cannot be erased. Its structure is not random. Layers exist because processes once arranged them. Even in perfect stillness, the arrangement remains. This arrangement is a fossil not just of life, but of activity itself. Every layer of ice, every mineral boundary, every isotopic gradient is a remnant of a time when energy flowed through the planet, when difference mattered, when the sun imposed direction on time by creating cycles. Without those cycles, time becomes flat. Flat time has no landmarks, no seasons, no eras, no events that stand out against what came before or after. In flat time, everything that happens is equivalent. Earth now exists entirely within flat time. This condition would be impossible to experience consciously. Consciousness depends on change, contrast, and memory. Without input, awareness cannot arise. The planet is not asleep. Sleep implies the possibility of waking. Earth is beyond that. It is simply present. There is no final transformation waiting ahead. No delayed catastrophe, no sudden end. Earth's future is not a story, it is a continuation. If the planet remains unbound to any star, it may persist in this state until the universe itself becomes unrecognizable, until expansion isolates every region completely, until even galaxies dissolve into lonely remnants. Earth will still be there, colder, quieter, but unchanged. In this sense, the disappearance of the sun does not lead to an ending. It leads to a convergence toward a condition where distinction no longer applies. The sun once created gradients. It imposed structure. It made time directional. With its absence, those features fade, leaving behind a universe that is uniform not because it was designed to be, but because nothing remains to prevent it. Earth becomes part of that uniformity, not destroyed, not erased, not forgotten, just absorbed into the background of existence. This is perhaps the most unsettling realization of all. The universe does not require events to justify continuation. It does not need drama, collapse, or resolution. It persists regardless. Earth's long journey without the sun demonstrates this indifference with clarity. A planet that once hosted oceans, life, intelligence, and meaning now drifts silently through space, carrying all of that history without any mechanism to express it. And yet, existence continues, not because it must, not because it has purpose, but because nothing stops it. In the absence of the sun, Earth does not fall into darkness alone. It joins a universe that, given enough time, becomes very much like it, cold, quiet, even, a reality where nothing needs to happen for everything to remain exactly as it is. As the timeline extends beyond anything that can be meaningfully compared to human experience, Earth's existence begins to merge with the deeper rhythms of the universe itself. The planet is no longer defined by what it once was, but by how it now fits into a cosmos that has grown vast, dilute, and increasingly uneventful. What remains is not a story unfolding, but a condition persisting. By this stage, Earth's physical state is remarkably simple. Temperature gradients are nearly non-existent. The planet's interior and surface differ only slightly in energy, and those differences continue to shrink. Heat no longer flows in any direction that produces structure. Entropy has done its work thoroughly and patiently. The materials that make up Earth, iron, silicates, frozen volatiles, are locked into arrangements that will not change unless acted upon by an external force. Chemical reactions still occur, but they are rare, isolated, and inconsequential. They do not cascade. They do not organize. They do not lead anywhere. In earlier eras, Earth was an engine of transformation. Energy arrived from the sun, flowed through atmosphere, oceans, and ecosystems, and left as heat radiated back into space. That flow created weather, climate, life, and history. Without the sun, the engine is dismantled. The remaining structure is intact but inert. This inertness brings Earth into alignment with the dominant state of the universe. Most matter in the cosmos exists in this quiet condition, cold, inactive, and unremarkable. Earth has joined the majority. The galaxy around it continues to evolve, but slowly. Star formation has declined dramatically. The most massive stars are long gone. Smaller stars burn on, but their light is faint and increasingly rare. The Milky Way becomes less a place of activity and more a collection of aging objects drifting in shared gravitational patterns. Earth passes through this environment unchanged. It does not interact meaningfully with nearby stars unless it comes extraordinarily close, which is unlikely. Space is too large. Distances are too vast. Isolation becomes the default. As the universe expands, that isolation deepens. Regions of space move away from one another faster than signals can travel between them. Causal contact shrinks. The universe fragments into islands that can no longer influence each other. Earth resides on one such island, carrying only what it already has. This expansion does not tear Earth apart. It does not stretch the planet. Expansion operates on scales far larger than planets or even galaxies. Earth remains structurally whole while the space between structures grows emptier. At this scale, the concept of after loses meaning. Events no longer follow one another in a way that creates narrative. Nothing leads to anything else. Time exists, but it does not accumulate significance. Earth becomes timeless not because time has stopped, but because time no longer changes anything that matters. This raises a subtle but important distinction. The planet is not eternal. It is not immune to all change. Given enough time, quantum processes, radioactive decay, and rare interactions will continue to alter its internal structure, but these changes are so slow and so uncoordinated that they never amount to transformation. They do not produce new states that differ meaningfully from old ones. Earth's future is not dynamic, it is asymptotic, always approaching stillness, never quite arriving at a final moment. If one were to imagine an external observer with infinite patience, watching Earth over trillions of years, they would see almost nothing happen. The planet would look the same at the beginning of observation and at the end. Any differences would require instruments and precision far beyond intuition. This near constancy reveals something profound about the nature of endings. The disappearance of the sun did not create a dramatic conclusion. It initiated a long flattening of possibility. the most important changes happened early. Everything after is refinement, reduction, and settling. Earth is no longer a place where surprises occur. Surprise requires contrast. It requires change that exceeds expectation. In a world where expectation is already minimal, surprise has no room to exist. The planet has become predictable not because it follows a pattern, but because it no longer produces outcomes at all. And yet, Earth still occupies space. It still has mass. It still curves space-time slightly around itself. It still participates in gravity. These properties do not vanish just because complexity has. This persistence highlights a fundamental hierarchy in reality. Existence is more durable than meaning. Matter outlasts structure. Structure outlasts function. Function outlasts awareness. Earth has moved down this hierarchy step by step. First awareness vanished. Then function. Then structure began to settle. What remains is matter arranged in a stable configuration. This hierarchy is not unique to Earth. It applies everywhere. Stars exhaust fuel. Galaxies disperse. Even black holes evaporate over unimaginable spans of time. Everything complex eventually simplifies. Earth's sudden loss of the Sun simply revealed this trajectory more clearly by accelerating the early stages. In this context, the Sun's role can be understood differently. It was not just a source of energy, it was a source of delay. It postponed equilibrium. It kept Earth out of its most statistically likely state. When the Sun disappeared, that delay ended. What followed was not chaos, but inevitability. Earth's story without the Sun is therefore not about destruction, but about convergence. A convergence toward the most probable configuration of matter, given enough time and no external input. This configuration is quiet, it is cold, it is stable, and it is common. In the distant future of the universe, most matter will exist in states similar to this: cold remnants, isolated objects, structures that persist without interacting. Earth has simply arrived there early. There is no lesson embedded in this outcome, no moral encoded in physics. The universe does not teach, it behaves. Meaning is something added temporarily by systems capable of interpreting difference. When those systems vanish, meaning vanishes with them. Earth does not remember the Sun, it does not remember life, it does not remember itself. Memory was never a planetary property, it was a biological one. Now that biology is gone, Earth is free of narrative. It drifts, it persists, it remains, and in that remaining it becomes indistinguishable from the vast majority of matter that never knew a star, never hosted life, and never required explanation. This is not a failure of existence, it is existence returned to its baseline. A planet no longer defined by what it did, but by what it is. A stable arrangement of matter moving through an increasingly empty universe, unchanged by time, untroubled by absence, and perfectly aligned with the quiet future of everything. As Earth continues drifting through an ever-quieting universe, the notion of scale begins to eclipse everything else. Not scale in terms of size or distance, but scale of time. The spans involved are now so vast that even the earlier language of millions or billions of years becomes inadequate. Earth has entered an era where change must be measured against the lifespan of the universe itself. By this stage, the Milky Way is no longer the active, structured galaxy it once was. Star formation has slowed to a near standstill. Most stars that remain are small, long-lived red dwarfs, emitting faint light that barely warms their surroundings. Massive stars, once the engines of cosmic change, are long gone. Supernovae are rare, and the heavy elements they once scattered are no longer being replenished in meaningful quantities. Earth passes through this environment without interaction. It does not orbit a star. It does not receive light. It does not participate in any cycle that renews complexity. That it is a passenger in a universe that has learned how to coast. At this point, Earth's composition matters less than its existence. Whether it contains frozen oceans, buried cities, or preserved biological remnants no longer affects anything beyond the planet itself. The distinctions that once made Earth unique have lost their power to influence outcomes. This is not because Earth has been erased, but because the universe has moved beyond the conditions where uniqueness matters. In earlier eras, uniqueness mattered because it interacted with surrounding systems. Life altered atmospheres. Oceans shaped climates. Intelligence reshaped landscapes. Those interactions amplified difference. Now, interaction itself has become rare. Without interaction, difference has nowhere to propagate. Earth's uniqueness collapses inward. The planet still has structure. Layers of ice, rock, and metal remain arranged in complex ways. But complexity without interaction is inert. Does not express itself, it does not evolve, it does not communicate. In this sense, Earth has become a closed book written in a language that no one reads. Time continues to pass, but time no longer carries direction. In the presence of active systems, time feels like progression. Events follow one another in ways that build meaning. Here, time feels like repetition without variation. Each moment resembles the last because nothing accumulates. This flattening of time reveals a subtle truth. Time only feels like time when something changes. Without change, time becomes indistinguishable from space, just another dimension of extension without narrative. Earth exists entirely within this flattened time. The planet's journey through space also loses narrative significance. Motion once mattered because it carried Earth through seasons, through stellar neighborhoods, through gravitational relationships. Now, motion is simply inertia. Earth moves because it was moving. There is no destination. This absence of destination does not imply failure, it implies neutrality. The universe does not require destinations, it does not aim. It unfolds according to probability and conservation, not purpose. Earth's current state aligns perfectly with this framework. In fact, Earth has become an example of the most statistically stable outcome for matter given enough time and no external input. Stable configurations persist, unstable ones decay. But Earth has finished decaying. This realization reframes the disappearance of the Sun yet again. The Sun did not remove meaning from Earth. It removed the conditions that allowed meaning to arise. Meaning was never embedded in matter itself, it was an emergent property of energy flowing through organized systems. When the flow stopped, the emergence stopped. This does not make meaning illusory, it makes it contextual. Earth's history of oceans, life, and consciousness remains valid within the context that allowed it. Outside that context, it becomes silent structure. The universe does not preserve context, it preserves matter. As the universe continues expanding, even the concept of a background begins to lose coherence. Distant galaxies fade beyond causal contact. The observable universe shrinks not because objects vanish, but because light from them can no longer reach any given point. Space grows emptier in a functional sense. Earth remains within this shrinking bubble of interaction, but the bubble itself becomes sparse. There are fewer events to observe, fewer changes to register, fewer signals to receive. The universe becomes increasingly transparent, not because it reveals more, but because there is less to reveal. In this environment, Earth's past becomes not just forgotten, but unreachable. Even if intelligence were to arise elsewhere, separated by immense distances and time, reconstructing Earth's story would be nearly impossible. Signals decay, context evaporates, interpretation fails. Earth's history becomes irretrievable not because it is hidden, but because the pathways to access it no longer exist. This is a subtle but profound form of loss. That's kind of not destruction, but disconnection. The planet itself remains intact. Its records remain embedded in matter, but meaning requires a bridge between record and reader. That bridge has collapsed. At this scale, the universe itself appears to favour disconnection. Expansion stretches space faster than relationships can form. Interaction becomes increasingly local and fleeting. The universe trends toward isolation, not through intent but through geometry. Earth fits perfectly into this geometry. The planet's existence without the sun thus becomes a microcosm of the universe's long-term trajectory. Systems form, interact, generate complexity, and then gradually lose the ability to interact. What remains is matter arranged in stable configurations drifting apart. This trajectory is not unique to planets, it applies to stars, galaxies, and even clusters of galaxies. Everything complex eventually becomes isolated. Everything isolated eventually becomes inert. Earth simply arrived early. There is a quiet elegance in this inevitability. It suggests that the universe does not destroy complexity violently, it dissolves it gently by removing the conditions that sustain it. Complexity fades not with explosions but with silence. The disappearance of the sun accelerated this fading for Earth, but it did not alter the underlying destination. Earth's role in this future universe is not to matter, but to persist. Persistence, stripped of meaning, becomes a physical fact rather than an experience. Earth persists because nothing acts strongly enough to change it. And in that persistence, the planet becomes an example of something larger than itself. The fate of matter in a universe that has had time to exhaust its gradients. This fate is not bleak or hopeful, it is neutral. The universe does not celebrate its stability, nor does it regret the loss of complexity. It simply continues to exist in the configuration that probability favours. Earth without the sun has become part of that configuration. A stable arrangement of matter, a remnant of a past defined by energy. A traveller in a cosmos where travel no longer leads anywhere, and as this final understanding settles in, one truth becomes unavoidable. The most enduring state of the universe is not chaos, but stillness. Earth has reached that stillness, not as a dramatic conclusion, but as a natural outcome. A planet no longer shaped by light, no longer defined by life, but still present, quietly occupying its place in a universe that has learned how to be very, very quiet. As Earth continues its quiet existence deep into the far future, a final shift occurs, not in the planet itself, but in how its existence can even be conceptualized. At this scale, Earth is no longer meaningfully separate from the universe around it. The distinction between planet and background weakens, not because Earth disappears, but because difference itself has become rare. In earlier epochs, Earth stood out. It was warm when space was cold, active when most matter was inert, alive when almost everything else was not. That contrast made it legible. It allowed Earth to be identified as something special. Now, that contrast has dissolved. Earth's temperature matches its surroundings, its activity level matches the cosmic average, its silence blends seamlessly into the silence of space. This blending marks a profound transition. Earth has not ended, it has normalized. In a universe dominated by low-energy states, normalization is the most common outcome. Energetic systems are temporary. They arise when conditions align and they fade when those conditions disperse. Earth's earlier vibrancy was one such alignment. Its current stillness is the statistical default. At this stage, Earth's physical structure becomes almost irrelevant to its fate. Whether it contains frozen oceans, compressed cities, or layered biological remnants no longer influences anything external. The planet's internal complexity has no outlet. It cannot express itself through interaction or change. It simply remains locked in place. This reveals a subtle truth about existence. Structure alone is not enough to generate significance. Significance requires interaction. Without interaction, even the most intricate structure becomes inert. Earth is now entirely inert in that sense. Time continues, but time no longer sculpts the planet. Geological processes are effectively finished. Chemical reactions proceed so slowly that they never accumulate. Atomic decay continues. but its effects are diffuse, uncoordinated, and inconsequential. Earth's future looks almost identical to its present. This near identity between present and future collapses the idea of destiny. Destiny implies direction. Direction implies change. Earth has neither. Instead, the planet exists in what could be called terminal stability, a state where change is not forbidden but irrelevant. The universe itself is moving toward this same condition. As expansion continues, matter becomes increasingly isolated. Energy gradients flatten. Events grow rarer. The universe does not rush toward an end. It drifts toward equilibrium. Earth, without the sun, has simply arrived there early. In this context, Earth becomes a preview of the universe's long-term behavior, a small-scale example of a much larger trend. The same processes that froze Earth will eventually quiet galaxies, stars, and even black holes. What makes Earth's story unique is not its destination, but its memory. Earth remembers its past physically, even if no consciousness remains to interpret it. Every layer of ice, every isotopic anomaly, every preserved structure is a fossil of activity. The planet is a record of a time when energy flowed freely enough to generate difference. Yet that record is passive. It does not announce itself. It does not insist on being read. Without an interpreter, it is indistinguishable from noise. This highlights an uncomfortable implication. History only exists where interpretation exists. Without minds to reconstruct it, history collapses into arrangement. Earth's past has not been erased, it has become unreadable. At this stage, even the idea of rediscovery loses relevance. The odds that another intelligent system will encounter Earth, recognize its significance, and reconstruct its story are vanishingly small. Not because intelligence is impossible, but because interaction pathways are closing. Expansion separates regions faster than light can connect them. Context evaporates. Earth may drift forever without ever being noticed again. And yet, from the universe's perspective, this does not matter. Noticeability is not a physical property, it is an emergent one. The planet's continued existence is sufficient. It occupies space-time. It contributes mass. It participates in gravity. That is all the universe requires of it. This realization reframes the disappearance of the sun one final time. The sun was not just a source of energy. It was a source of participation. It connected Earth to larger systems. It allowed feedback, cycles, and influence. When the sun vanished, Earth lost not just warmth, but relevance. Relevance, in physical terms, is the ability to affect and be affected. Earth can no longer do either in a meaningful way. This is not a tragedy. Tragedy requires a subject who experiences loss. Earth is not a subject. It is an object obeying physical law. Its transformation is neither good nor bad. It is simply consistent. Yet for those who once depended on the sun, this outcome carries a quiet clarity. It reveals how narrow the window for complexity truly is. Life, intelligence, and meaning arise only when energy flows strongly enough to sustain difference. Outside that window, matter settles. Earth's window closed abruptly, but the closure followed the same rules that govern all systems. In that sense, Earth's fate is not exceptional. It is illustrative. The planet teaches nothing intentionally, but it demonstrates something unmistakably. The universe favors persistence over expression. Expression is temporary. Persistence is durable. As Earth continues drifting through a universe that is steadily losing its ability to generate novelty, it becomes less a former world and more a representative one. A representative of what remains when everything that can happen has already happened. There is no final moment when Earth becomes something else. No threshold it crosses where it can be said to have ended. The transition into stillness is asymptotic, always approaching, never concluding. This makes the concept of a final state misleading. Earth does not arrive. By evolve, it simply continues without changing. And in that continuation, the planet embodies the quiet truth of deep time. Most of existence is not dramatic. Most of it is not active. Most of it is not meaningful in any human sense. Most of it simply is. Earth without the sun has joined that majority. not destroyed, not erased, not forgotten, just present. A stable configuration of matter moving through a universe that has learned how to become very still. And in that stillness, Earth no longer tells a story. It no longer needs to. As this journey reaches its final stretch, Earth's existence settles into something that no longer resembles a narrative at all. What remains is not an aftermath, not a consequence still unfolding, but a condition that has fully stabilized. The planet has passed beyond transition. It no longer moves toward anything. It simply persists. At this stage, Earth cannot meaningfully be described as a former home, a failed system, or a lost world. Those descriptions rely on comparison to what once was. Comparison requires perspective, and perspective requires observers. Without observers, Earth is not a remnant of anything. It is just matter arranged the way it happens to be arranged. The ice that entombs the planet is no longer a phase, it is permanent. The rock beneath it is no longer a foundation, it is a final layer. Nothing presses upward, nothing erodes downward. Pressure and temperature have reached long-term balance. Earth has become mechanically quiet. In this state, even decay becomes unimportant. Radioactive elements continue to transform, but the changes are isolated and dispersed. No chain reactions follow, no feedback loops emerge. Each atomic event is self-contained, forgotten the moment it occurs. Time still exists, but it no longer organizes experience. This is what it means for a system to outlive consequence. The universe around Earth continues to expand, and in doing so, it slowly removes the last remaining possibility of interaction. Distant galaxies slip beyond any chance of contact. Signals fade before they can arrive. Space stretches until connection becomes mathematically impossible. The universe does not grow emptier in content, but emptier in relationship. Earth becomes perfectly suited to this environment. It requires no input. It produces no output. It does not exchange energy, information, or matter in any meaningful way. It exists as a closed configuration, drifting through an ever quieter cosmos. At this scale, the distinction between Earth and not Earth becomes almost arbitrary. The planet is no longer part of a system that defines it as special. It is simply one of countless objects shaped by gravity and time. Its past richness does not grant it privilege in the future. This is not because the universe is cruel or dismissive. It is because the universe does not operate on memory. Memory was a biological phenomenon. Meaning was a cognitive one. Purpose was a human projection. None of these were properties of matter itself. When the sun disappeared, Earth did not lose its purpose. It revealed that purpose was never embedded in the planet. It was embedded in the systems that briefly existed upon it. Those systems are gone. What remains is not absence, but sufficiency. Earth no longer needs anything to continue being what it is. There is no pressure to change, no incentive to evolve, no instability demanding resolution. It has reached a configuration that can persist indefinitely under the laws that govern it. This persistence is not eternal in an absolute sense. Given unimaginable spans of time, even protons may decay. Even matter itself may transform into something else. But those possibilities lie so far beyond relevance that they cease to matter even conceptually. They do not shape expectation, they do not influence outcome. Earth's future is functionally complete. This completeness carries a quiet implication. Endings are not events, they are conditions. There was no moment when Earth ended. There was only a gradual loss of difference until difference no longer mattered. The disappearance of the sun accelerated that loss, but it did not invent it. In a universe governed by entropy, all systems move towards states where nothing more can happen. Earth arrived there early, abruptly stripped of the energy that once delayed equilibrium. What followed was not chaos, but calm. This calm is not peaceful in the human sense. Peace implies resolution of conflict. There is no conflict left to resolve. There is only balance. Earth no longer contrasts with its surroundings. It does not stand out against the background of space. It has become background. And yet, it is important to recognize what this does and does not mean. Earth has not been erased. Its past has not been undone. Its existence has not been negated. Everything that ever happened on Earth still happened. Every ocean, every organism, every thought, every civilization existed fully within the time that allowed it. The universe does not retroactively remove those realities. It simply does not preserve their relevance. Relevance was never guaranteed. This realization strips away the temptation to frame Earth's fate as tragic or unfair. Tragedy implies expectation violated. The universe made no promises. It offered conditions, and for a time, those conditions allowed extraordinary complexity to emerge. When the conditions ended, complexity ended with them. Earth's long drift through space without the sun demonstrates this with clarity. It shows that existence does not aim toward meaning. Meaning arises temporarily when systems are capable of noticing difference. When those systems disappear, meaning disappears too, but existence remains. This is perhaps the most honest conclusion available. Not hopeful, not bleak, simply accurate. Earth persists because nothing prevents it from persisting. The universe continues because nothing requires it to stop. There is no final silence that arrives, no last image that defines the end, no closing moment that seals the story. There is only continuation without variation. Earth, once a world of light and motion, now exists as a stable arrangement of matter moving through a universe that has grown increasingly still. It does not ask to be remembered. It does not need to be understood. It simply is, and in that state, Earth becomes indistinguishable from the future that awaits almost everything, a future where energy gradients flatten, interactions fade, and reality continues without emphasis. The sun once made Earth exceptional by sustaining difference. Without the sun, Earth has become ordinary again, not lesser, not diminished, not lost, just aligned with the quiet, patient truth of the universe itself. This is not an ending. It is what remains when endings no longer apply. As Earth continues to persist beyond the point where persistence itself carries meaning, a deeper transformation becomes apparent, not in matter, not in motion, but in relevance. The planet has crossed a threshold where its existence no longer participates in any larger pattern that can be interpreted as development, decay, or destination. What remains is pure continuity. At this scale, Earth is no longer after the sun. The absence of the sun is no longer an event in the past. It has become a background condition, indistinguishable from the absence of anything else. The planet does not experience loss as a sequence. Loss has settled into permanence. This is an important distinction. In earlier phases, the disappearance of the sun caused reactions: cooling, freezing, collapse, silence. Those reactions created a sense of progression. Now, progression has ended. Earth has absorbed the absence fully. The planet's trajectory through space continues, but trajectory itself has lost meaning. Movement without reference points is indistinguishable from stillness. Earth moves through a universe where distances grow faster than relationships can form. Direction no longer implies arrival. This is not because space is empty, but because emptiness has become dominant. The universe has not erased structure, it has diluted it. Stars still exist, galaxies still drift, matter still clumps where gravity allows, but the intervals between these structures have expanded to such an extent that interaction has become exceptional rather than expected. Earth resides in one of those intervals. At this stage, even the concept of environment becomes difficult to apply. An environment implies influence. Earth's surroundings no longer influence it in any meaningful way. Cosmic radiation continues to pass through, but its effects are negligible. Gravitational tides from distant masses exist, but they do not reshape the planet. Earth is effectively isolated from causality beyond itself. Isolation here is not confinement, it is independence taken to its extreme. The planet no longer depends on external conditions, it no longer responds to them either. It exists as a closed system whose internal changes are too small, too slow, and too disconnected to matter. This closed system existence highlights something subtle about the nature of endings. Endings are not points, they are asymmetries, disappearing. When there is no longer a before that differs from after, the idea of an ending dissolves. Earth has not ended, it has equalized. This equalization extends beyond temperature and energy. It extends into probability itself. The likelihood of any meaningful change occurring on Earth has become vanishingly small. Not zero, but so small that over cosmic timescales it may as well be. Possibility still exists in principle, physics allows it. But without gradients to exploit, without concentrations to amplify, possibility cannot express itself. It remains evenly distributed, neutralized by uniformity. The universe permits motion, the universe permits change. But permission alone does not generate consequence. Earth is now a place where everything that can happen still can happen, but nothing that happens accumulates into difference. This marks the final stage of planetary existence as defined by interaction. From this point forward, Earth is no longer part of any evolving system. It is not part of a cycle. It is not part of a feedback loop. It is not part of a narrative arc. It is part of a condition. That condition is not unique to Earth. It is the destination of all isolated matter given enough time. Earth's only distinction is that it arrived there abruptly rather than gradually. In earlier cosmic histories, planets like Earth would eventually lose their stars through stellar evolution. Their suns would swell, fade, collapse, or disperse. Earth skipped that slow farewell. The sun vanished instantly, removing not just energy but anticipation. What followed was not chaos but acceleration toward equilibrium. Now that equilibrium has been reached, acceleration has ceased. Earth has no more momentum in the direction of change. This stillness is not fragile, it is extraordinarily robust. Without processes that introduce instability, nothing can destabilize the planet except forces of unimaginable scale, collisions, tidal disruptions, or cosmic events so rare they border on theoretical. Even those events are becoming less likely as the universe expands. Earth's survival in this sense is not heroic, it is incidental. It survives because survival no longer requires effort. There is a quiet irony here. Earth once required constant input to remain habitable. Temperature had to be regulated. Atmosphere had to be maintained. Life had to continuously adapt. Now Earth requires nothing to remain what it is. Stability has replaced vitality. This replacement is not a trade-off the universe evaluates. It is simply what happens when energy flows cease. Systems that once needed maintenance become self-maintaining only because nothing disturbs them. Earth's long silence reveals something fundamental about physical reality. Change is expensive. It requires energy, gradients, imbalance, and interaction. When those inputs disappear, change becomes rare. When change becomes rare, history ends. Not with a final chapter, but with the inability to write new ones. The planet no longer holds potential in the way it once did. Potential is not stored energy, it is energy positioned to move. Earth's energy is no longer positioned, it is settled. And yet, Earth's existence remains valid. There is no cosmic requirement that matter must do something interesting in order to justify being. Matter exists because it exists. The universe does not ask for performance. This realization strips away the last temptation to anthropomorphize Earth's fate. There is no sadness embedded in stillness. Sadness requires loss felt by a subject. There is no subject here. What remains is not despair, but neutrality. Earth does not suffer its condition, does not enjoy it either. It does not know it. It simply persists, governed by equations that no longer generate surprise. In the deepest future, as the universe continues to expand and cool, Earth will remain one of countless silent witnesses, not witnessing in awareness, but in presence, a physical record of what once was possible when energy was abundant and relationships were dense. That record may never be read. It may never be found, it may never be interpreted, and that does not diminish it. Earth's history mattered while it was happening. Its consequences existed while systems were capable of receiving them. Outside that window, consequence dissolves. This is not a flaw in reality, it is how reality conserves itself. The universe does not preserve meaning, it preserves law. Earth obeys those laws perfectly, and in doing so, it demonstrates the final truth of a planet without a sun. When all sources of difference are removed, what remains is not emptiness, but sufficiency. Existence without demand, continuation without direction, presence without expectation. Earth no longer orbits a star. How is this a turning new? It orbits time itself, slowly, evenly, and without end. As everything finally settles into its most enduring form, Earth's existence becomes indistinguishable from the deepest structure of reality itself. There is no longer a sense in which the planet can be described as moving forward, declining, or waiting. Those ideas depend on contrast, and contrast has faded completely. What remains is a state that does not resolve into an ending, because nothing is left that could conclude. At this scale of time, Earth no longer occupies a meaningful now. The present does not differ from the future in any way that can be detected. Every moment is functionally identical to the next, not because time has stopped, but because time has lost its ability to shape outcomes. The planet persists in a condition where persistence itself no longer needs justification. The universe around Earth continues to expand, but expansion no longer produces novelty. Space stretches, distances grow, and causal connections thin until most regions are permanently isolated. This isolation is not dramatic, it does not arrive suddenly. It simply becomes absolute. Once isolation is complete, interaction ceases not through destruction, but through irrelevance. Earth exists fully within this irrelevance. The planet is no longer influenced by anything beyond itself. And nothing it does, if it can be said to do anything at all, has influence beyond its own boundaries. It has become causally complete. Nothing enters, nothing leaves, nothing propagates. In earlier ages, Earth was defined by exchange. Energy arrived from the sun. Matter cycled through atmosphere, oceans, and living systems. Information flowed through ecosystems and minds. That exchange created motion, complexity, and history. Without the sun, exchange collapsed. What followed was not collapse in the violent sense, but closure. Closure without intention. Closure without finality. Closure without awareness. Earth is now a closed book in a universe that no longer reads. Even the most extreme possibilities lose relevance here. Questions about whether Earth might be destroyed by a distant event, swallowed by a black hole, or altered by some unforeseen process fade into abstraction. The probability of such events becomes so small and their timescales so vast that they no longer shape expectation. Possibility exists, but it does not act. This is the quiet truth of deep time. When nothing favours change, change becomes optional rather than inevitable. Earth's atoms continue to obey physical law. They vibrate faintly, they decay slowly. They respond to forces that no longer vary, but none of these processes accumulate into transformation. Each event is isolated, erased by uniformity the moment it occurs. The universe has not become empty, it has become evenly filled with inactivity. At this stage, even the idea of the universe having a future becomes misleading. A future implies difference. It implies that something ahead will not resemble what exists now. But when all accessible states are statistically equivalent, The distinction between present and future dissolves. Earth does not move toward what comes next. It remains where everything has already arrived. This does not mean the universe has failed to become something more. Becoming more was never a requirement written into reality. The universe does not optimize for richness or meaning. It optimizes for stability because stability is what remains when all other processes exhaust themselves. Earth is a perfect expression of that principle. Once a world of oceans and skies, of motion and memory, it now exists as a stable configuration of matter embedded in space-time. Nothing about its current state contradicts its past. The same laws that allowed complexity to arise also allow stillness to persist. The universe did not change its rules, only the conditions changed. Meaning did not vanish because it was taken away. It vanished because the systems that generated it no longer exist. This distinction matters. The universe does not erase experiences retroactively. Everything that happened on Earth happened fully, completely, and irreversibly. Life lived. Thought emerged. History unfolded. None of that is undone by what follows. The absence of continuation does not negate the reality of what once was. Earth does not need to be remembered for its past to have been real. Reality does not depend on permanence. In this final condition, Earth becomes something closer to a boundary than an object, a boundary between eras of the universe, a marker of how far complexity can go before conditions withdraw, a silent demonstration of what remains when energy gradients flatten and interaction fades. The planet does not announce this role, it does not perform it consciously. It simply occupies the state that naturally follows, and in doing so Earth reveals the deepest structure of existence, that most of reality is not animated, dramatic, or meaningful in any human sense. Most of reality is quiet, stable, and indifferent to interpretation. Life and meaning are rare not because they are fragile mistakes, but because they require narrow conditions. When those conditions disappear, rarity gives way to uniformity. Earth's sun once maintained those conditions. Without it, Earth has joined the universe's default. There is no final darkness that arrives, no silence that suddenly falls, no moment where everything stops. There is only continuation without emphasis. Earth remains, the universe remains, time remains. Not as a story unfolding, but as a condition sustained. And in that condition, the disappearance of the sun is no longer an event to be remembered. It is simply part of the geometry of what exists now. This is not an ending written at the end of a journey. It is what remains when journeys no longer occur.